Welcome back to The Explainer. Let's just jump right in because today we are looking at one of the most incredibly turbulent and honestly fascinating domino effects in mid-19th century history. We're exploring the crucible of Mexican sovereignty. This is a massive story. We're talking sweeping reform, a brutal civil war, unpayable national debts, and a full-blown foreign intervention. So think about this for a second. Why do societies sometimes resist rapid change, even to the absolute breaking point of sparking a civil war? It's a pretty profound question about society, tradition, and modernization. And in the middle of the 19th century, Mexico essentially became the ultimate ideological powder keg for this exact conflict. Section 1. A divided post-war nation. To set the stage here, we really have to look at the massive hangover Mexico faced right after its independence from Spain in 1821. They were already struggling to create a stable government, but the real deep fracture happened following the Mexican-American War. Mexico lost nearly half of its territory to the United States. Just imagine that. How exactly does losing all that land, those resources, and that national confidence create such severe political division? Well, that crushing loss devastated the economy, it completely shattered national pride, and it essentially broke the country's political leadership in half. They became deeply, fiercely divided over what the future of the nation should even look like. We're looking at two totally incompatible visions here. On one side, you've got the liberals, championed by figures like Benito Juarez. They are pushing hard for sweeping modernization. They want a constitutional republic based on equality before the law. They firmly believed they had to limit the outsized power of the military and the Catholic Church, like selling off church lands to boost the economy and putting education under government control. Basically, a modern democratic republic. On the flip side, we have the conservatives. And they absolutely opposed this. They felt this liberal agenda was going to rip apart the very foundations of Mexican society. At the time, the Catholic Church was incredibly wealthy and ran most of the schools and charities. Conservatives argued that weakening the church would just destroy social stability. They wanted a strong centralized government, traditional authority, and honestly, some even believed Mexico would be way better off under a European-style monarchy. Which brings us to Section 2, the Bloody Reform War. Because this wasn't just some heated debate in a parliament building, right? It exploded into a devastating civil war over the cultural and political soul of the country. And the human cost was just enormous. Cities changed hands repeatedly, brutal violence spread across the entire countryside, and the nation's economy practically collapsed under the weight of it all. Now, the liberals did ultimately win in 1861, but here's the catch. While they won the war, President Juarez inherited an absolute ruin. Let's actually trace this domino effect of crisis. First up, you have that massive defeat and territorial loss in the Mexican-American War. That deep instability leads directly to domino number 2, the catastrophic Reform War. That internal destruction naturally leads to number 3, complete national bankruptcy, which ultimately forces President Juarez into a desperate corner for number 4, suspending foreign debt payments. Juarez had a bankrupt government and these massive debts owed to Spain, England, and France. To even attempt to rebuild the domestic economy, he announced a temporary halt on all debt payments. And that leads us right into Section 3, the unpayable foreign debt. Now you might be wondering, how does being broke suddenly invite a foreign invasion? Well, when a country is internally exhausted and economically totally bankrupt, it becomes incredibly vulnerable. Mexico's temporary suspension of debt acted like a giant bat signal to angry European powers. They weren't just going to sit around and wait patiently for their money. They decided to use pure military force to pressure Mexico into paying up. So here is how it all escalated, step by step. Step 1. European military forces arrive right at the Mexican port of Veracruz. It's a massive show of intimidation. Step 2. Diplomacy actually works. Kinda. Spain and England negotiate settlements with the Mexican government and they pack up and leave. But step 3 is where history completely pivots. France stays. Emperor Napoleon III of France didn't just want his money back, he had a much bigger, much bolder political agenda. He wanted to set up a French-aligned monarchy right there in the Americas to expand French influence and specifically to stop the spread of liberal republicanism dead in its tracks. This kicks off Section 4. The French invasion begins. So 1862 rolls around and French troops start marching inland, and they are expecting an absolute cakewalk here. After all, they're facing a bankrupt nation fresh out of a grueling civil war. But Mexican forces completely refuse to just roll over. On May 5, 1862, General Ignacio Zaragoza led a Mexican army against the French near the city of Puebla. Sargazoga's forces were way smaller, and they were really poorly equipped compared to this highly trained, elite European army. It was quite literally a massive underdog situation. Which takes us to Section 5, the legendary Battle of Puebla. Against absolutely all expectations, Zaragoza's underdog troops defeated the French invaders. It was a shocking upset, a massive symbolic victory. Sure, it didn't end the war on the spot, but it provided this incredible, powerful surge of national pride. For the liberals, it proved they were genuinely defending Mexican sovereignty and their hard-won republic against both foreign empires and the looming threat of a conservative monarchy. So why does a purely symbolic victory matter so much? Actually, scratch that. It wasn't just symbolic. It was ideological fuel. It gave the people the sheer willpower to keep fighting. But there's some deep dramatic irony here. While May 5th, the Battle of Puebla, was a phenomenal morale boost, it was a false resolution. Defeating the French vanguard didn't make the French Empire just give up and go home. In fact, the embarrassment of that loss only provoked a massive, overwhelming French retaliation.
Moving to Section 6, Occupation and Enduring Resistance.
Because the very next year, France comes back, and it is devastating. They commit significantly more troops to the invasion. That symbolic shield from Puebla, it didn't hold. The city was captured the following year. And then came the ultimate blow. French forces pushed forward and successfully captured the capital, Mexico City, in 1863. With the capital falling, we see this moment of sheer absolute desperation. President Benito Juárez and his legitimate liberal government are literally forced into exile within their own borders. They flee north. But, and this is absolutely crucial, they didn't surrender. They set up a mobile government to keep the resistance alive from afar. They completely refused to give up the republic they had just bled for during the Reform War. Meanwhile, back in the occupied capital, that conservative dream we talked about earlier basically becomes a reality. With French military muscle backing them up, Mexican conservatives and French officials go ahead and install a European monarch. They make Austrian Archduke Maximilian I the Emperor of Mexico. So they finally got that centralized, European-backed monarchy and church-state cooperation they had been fighting for. So what does this all mean? How did a foreign intervention end up deepening a domestic conflict instead of ending it? Well, the French invasion didn't happen in a vacuum. It acted like an amplifier for that pre-existing civil struggle. What started as a domestic fight over secular schools, church lands, and a constitution morphed into a literal war against a foreign empire that was actively propping up one side of the debate. For the liberals, it became a dual fight, a fight for their specific vision of a republic, and a fight for the very existence of an independent Mexico itself. I want to leave you with this final thought to chew on for this explainer. Is a nation's sovereignty defined by who happens to sit in its capital, or is it defined by the enduring resistance of its people? Because while Emperor Maximilian sat in a palace in Mexico City, backed by one of the strongest militaries on earth, Benito Juárez was running a government from the rugged northern frontier, keeping the very idea of a free, liberal Mexican republic alive. It really forces us to ask what truly makes a nation. And it leaves you wondering just how long that northern resistance could possibly hold out against a global empire. Thanks for diving into this with us. Keep asking those hard questions, and we'll see you in the next explainer.